Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, brought to you by InView, LawView's community for in-house legal professionals, where we dive into the heart of the legal profession to bring you unfiltered discussions with industry titans on a broad spectrum of topics.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm David Lancelot, your host. I'm the CLO and EVP Advocacy at LawView. I have the great pleasure to have with me here today Peter Connor, who is the founder and CEO of T-Shaped Legal. Thank you, Peter, for being here.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be talking with you again.
I think probably we should start with how we met. I think that's always worth helping the audience understand. Peter wrote a great book, The T-Shaped Lawyer. It has a longer title, A New Vision for Corporate.
New Vision for Lawyers. Actually, that's book one. And the second book's The T-Shaped Legal Framework, the two books.
Right. I always think of it as The T-Shaped Lawyer.
Yep.
And when I read that and spoke with Peter, I knew that, this is somebody I really wanted to know, right? Really wanted to talk to, really wanted to get involved with. And I had the very good fortune to have Peter allow me to use his book as the textbook for my class at the University of Florida College of Law, a class I teach called International In-House Legal Leadership. The students loved the book, and Peter was also kind enough to be a guest speaker in the class from Australia. This is a class in Gainesville, Florida, of course. So thank you very much, Peter, just to start with, for your support in that. I think it's super, super valuable, the kind of content that you and others of your sort of caliber are putting out for in-house lawyers these days. And I strongly recommend reading those two books for sure.
It was a pleasure.
I think they're really good. I think they're really, yours especially. I think that's, I've told, I can't remember how many people I've told to read your book, Peter, but it's probably over 100. And I always tell them I read it in 2 sittings. And there are not many books about something as dry as in-house legal practice, right? We're not talking about,
No.
John Grisham, Tom Clancy at the beach, right? We're talking about in-house legal practice. And I literally read it most of it in the first sitting, I think. And then I was like, I got to finish this book now, right? I've read 100 pages. I got to read the rest. And I read the rest. And I was just like, man, like that doesn't happen very often, right? So it's written in a way that it absolutely connected with how I think about in-house legal practice. It's one of those books where you're like, yes, exactly. And it's written in a way that it's very easy to digest, which is why I think I constantly tell people to read it. So thanks for doing that.
Welcome.
I think we could start with just an introduction of where you come from, because I think it's really important for people to know how deep your background is in in-house practice. So why don't we start way back? Where did you first start practicing law?
In Sydney, Australia, with Baker McKenzie. The international law firm, worked there as, general corporate legal, did all the different practices as you do when you start. And then I went from there up to Baker McKenzie's Hong Kong office. They had a program called the Associate Training Program, the idea of which you were supposed to go for 18 months and then come back and become a partner. But I loved it so much, I never came back. It was a one-way ticket. And I ended up staying in Hong Kong for probably about 3 or 4 years with Baker's. And that was terrific, doing Asia Pacific regional work, commercial work, doing with a lot of corporate clients, a lot of computer clients, the early computer clients. I mean, I'm an old dude, as you can tell, and there was literally the first wave of in-house lawyers going into Intel, Microsoft, and I went into Sun Microsystems back in the late 80s. That was my entree into the in-house legal world.
Well, yeah. And we've spoken about this before, but I was also at Baker in London. So we share a sort of common, we spent time in one of those firms that is definitely as international as it gets, right? Like it doesn't get much more international than Baker McKenzie. So I think it's fair to say that you're probably at least a generation, maybe the generation before me, in terms of like getting into in-house and getting into tech. Um, so we're talking late 80s. What happens after that? Where do you go from Baker into the coolest cities in the world?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was very lucky to work in various places. So when I went, joined Sun Microsystems, now part of Oracle, they had a terrific ride. I actually started my working life with them in Silicon Valley. So I went to Silicon Valley, spent about a year there, which was terrific. I mean, where you're based, and what an amazing place to work. I think just to experience the energy and the buzz was really quite something. And then I went back to Hong Kong with with Sun, to be the Asia Pacific General Counsel for about like a year and a half. And from there, I had an opportunity to go to Europe to be the European General Counsel for Sun Microsystems. And I went there, based it in the UK, building up a team. We had a small team to start with, and then I built it up to about 35 people during the height of of Sun's business. And we were looking after, the EMEA region. That was terrific. I was there for about 5 years, I think. So that was that was my first taste of Europe. And then I came back to Australia to basically for personal reasons, start a family. And then I was looking after the Asia Pacific region then for Sun. So that was my time with Sun, which was a great company. I got to meet a lot of folks that
Yep.
Brian Martin, Jeff Frankie,
Yep.
Connie Brenton, people like that. It was the Sun alumni now, spreads wide and far.
Yeah. No, and I think from what I've seen, and I've really felt this, that the people that you mentioned, and we've had them on the show, Jeff Frankie, Brian Martin, Connie, we haven't had on the show yet, but those guys founded Clock. Brian is at Nutanix now, but he's been a player in the Valley for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Those people, including yourself, have a real a role in creating what it means to be an in-house lawyer today. I think that's fair to say.
Exactly.
So Sun, probably 15 years-ish with
Yeah.
Sun, something like that.
Would have been a
Super.
bit longer. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard from Jeff and Brian as well, what a great team there was at Sun through that time. And Jeff's creating legal ops and you're doing international. And I mean, it's a really interesting story there. And then off to Citrix.
Yeah, that's right. So about Sun's business started to decline. And the reality is, when you work in house, it's more fun to work in a company that's doing well than one that's not. That's
Indeed. Indeed. Totally.
Yeah. And so at that time, Sun was starting to decline. The business was declining. It wasn't quite the same vibe to work in the legal department. And an opportunity came up to go to Europe, this time Switzerland, to be the European General Counsel of Citrix Systems, a US tech company doing, that remote software. Pretty much everyone had Citrix on their system back in the day as a way to connect remotely to your files and things. So I moved to Switzerland and had, probably about 9 years there as the European General Counsel for Citrix, which was terrific. A company that was doing great, a lovely part of the world. This time I was on the continent, so that made even, I think the experience even richer. And living in Switzerland, a pretty nice place to live.
Yeah. Not a lot of downsides to expatting to Switzerland. I think that's definitely on my list. I of course know a bunch of people who work for eBay in Switzerland.
Right.
And got to visit them there. And I've still talk to them and follow them on Strava, of course, where they're, mountain biking and skiing and having a grand old time
Exactly.
in Zurich. So that sounds lovely. But I think more importantly, that like your third GC role? I'm feeling regional GC role.
Yep.
That's right. So three GC roles. And then I think, you decided to do something else. I think.
Yeah. So I wanted at that point, our kids had grown up. They'd moved to university in the UK, and it was just my wife and I. And we thought, we're going to stay in Switzerland or go back to Australia. And so decided to go back to Australia. Pretty tough choice, but
Yep.
two good places to live. And then I thought, do I want to go back into the GC role again? And I thought, no, not really. Let's try something different. And we're talking literally 10 years, pretty much 10 years to the day, to the month
Wow.
now. And I thought, well, what do I love doing? And what I love doing is really working with people, other lawyers, younger lawyers, even older lawyers, and them to challenge their way of thinking. Because, as we were talking earlier about the kind of, the legal department at Sun and also true at Citrix, I think with tech companies in general, eBay, is that I think what's good about working at a tech company in-house is that you get a sort of a freedom to work in ways that perhaps you don't if you work in a bank or something like that. And so what happened is I largely by good fortune, sort of an opportunity, got to work in a very, very commercial and pragmatic way that, no one told me how to do that. It was just kind of something I evolved to. It was one of the reasons that, I went in-house in the first place, is this opportunity, not just to do, business work, but to be actually connected to the business and really make a difference. And you realize that you can do that much more than perhaps that you think. But there's no guidance on that. And so some people figure it out and do it. And frankly, the vast majority don't, or they don't do it as well. So it was that was the seed, if you will, for me starting what was originally called Alternatively Legal. And I now call it T-shaped legal for reasons that I'll explain later. So, so I thought, well, look, why don't I just start this up? This was back in the day when there was just a handful of people doing, they weren't consultants, they weren't trainers or anything. I mean, Axiom was around, Mitch Golowski out of Canada was doing a similar thing. There was a handful of us. So we were really the first wave of, I guess you'd call it, alternative legal service providers. In my case, I wasn't providing talent for hire. I was just providing myself and the ideas. And so I started, doing these workshops for mainly in-house legal, but also for law firms as well. And I curated a program which was originally called Everything But the Law. That was the original name for it. So that kind of gives you a sense of what it was all about. And I subsequently came across the idea of the T-shaped professional, which for those of you who don't know is the idea that it's very popular in pretty much every profession. So the idea is that most professionals, whether they're lawyers, accountants, engineers, whatever, are pretty I-shaped. In other words, they've got a very deep expertise in one area, in our case, the law, but frankly, very limited expertise, capabilities beyond that area. And that is, okay, and arguably was okay in the past when professionals worked in silos. But now, especially working in-house, when you're working collaboratively with people from all sorts of different functions, in order to work effectively, in order to, with those people and to innovate for the company, not just the department, you really do need to be able to understand and be able to contribute beyond your area of expertise. Hence the T-shape. So the horizontal, the idea is you don't want to be necessarily an expert in all these areas. You want to be what's called a generalist. So it's an expert generalist. So a legal expert, business generalist is the idea. So when I stumbled upon that T-shaped professional idea, I thought, yeah, wow, that really captures the essence of my program. And so I adopted it and it was the first to apply that to lawyers, especially to in-house lawyers. And since then, I've done nothing else but sort of refine it and develop it and write the books and do the programs, which we can talk about later.
Sure. Yeah. So I think back to when I was, relatively junior, and as you were saying, like nobody taught you how to be really anything in-house, right? Like, what's my job? Well, it's to
Yeah.
be the in-house lawyer. Okay, well, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And trying to create some kind of framework for what that meant. And I was lucky enough to be sort of one generation later than you, and there were some books. Bjarne's book, your book, Susskind had a few things out, right? And so there was something that if you had the wherewithal, you could actually look and try, and because your boss wasn't going to tell you,
No.
because she didn't know, right? And certainly no one at the law firm was going to tell you. So but you were before all of those things, right? So I find it really interesting to understand how people, like, who was your mentor? Where did you learn how to be a business person with legal skills as opposed to just a substantive expert who says no all the time,
That's
right?
a great question, David. Very good question. I've thought about that a little bit over the years, and there was no one person, but I think what I had, and I acknowledge these people in my book. There were people, partners of Baker McKenzie, for example, who were very commercial. Now, they didn't think of themselves as T-shaped lawyers, but in effect they were. They were very commercial. They didn't approach things like most private practitioners who are very legalistic. They were not that way. And so I just sort of saw the way they worked, the way they thought, the way they communicated with their clients, and with other lawyers in the firm. And I guess I picked up the seeds of some of this when I worked at Baker's. And then when I went in-house, so my first gig was with Sun Microsystems. And I, again, was very fortunate to work with some really good lawyers to start with, who were very much that way as well. And most importantly, I think, both the lawyers who I reported to and the business people that I worked with gave me the opportunity. They didn't kind of hold me back. There was no like, you just got to do this, you got to do that. Of course, you had templates and stuff to work with, but it was pretty much free license. So with my natural instincts to commercial instincts and love for the business and interest in the business, I guess it was all those things combined that then just, as much scope as I was given, I would take all of it and more in order to just dive deep into this. And I realized that, and this is the reality, I mentioned this in the book. What I realized was that, sure, legal work, you add a certain value by doing legal work and giving legal advice. But where your clients, in other words, your business colleagues that you interact with, what they really value is your business contribution, your ability, which could be anything from asking good questions to, making them aware of things they weren't aware of, either internally, externally, or perhaps making suggestions. And when you get good at it, you really then they start coming back to you and say, well, hang on, last time I spoke with this person, they really had some good ideas. I'm going to go and bounce off the ideas. It's not legal advice. So you kind of slip into this and all of a sudden you become, this is my version of a T-shape lawyer, you become a business person who happens to be a lawyer. Not a lawyer with business skills, but a business person who, and then we can get into the T-shape lawyer later. But so that was kind of how I fell into it. And I loved it. It was fun. It was far more interesting than doing NDAs and all that. I get that stuff done, and you find ways to do that. But thankfully now with technology like LawVu and a lot of other stuff, particularly this AI and agentic AI, there's lots of opportunities now to get out of that stuff even more than back in our day. But that's where the fun stuff is. And that's where you can really make a contribution.
Yeah. Well, of course I agree.
Yeah.
But it's really, I think there's an element there of curiosity that not everybody has, right? Not everybody is interested and excited to be in a particular kind of company, maybe.
Yep.
You're in a cool, for the time, cutting edge tech business, right? And I'm sure that was exciting and interesting in those days. And I could understand why you'd want to, dive deep and be with the business. But I bet you there were some people, even at Sun, who were like, yeah, my job is to be a lawyer here, and you're really trying to take me out of my swim lane. And I'm going to draft amazing terms and conditions. I'm going to stay late, making them super, super shiny.
Yep.
And then they wonder, why don't I get invited to the meetings?
Yep.
Why does the business not want to hang out with me? And they start getting really depressed and burnt out because they're doing a law firm job at a company.
That's it. That's it. And that still happens, sadly. It happens more than it should today.
Absolutely.
So it's true that, and that's why in my T-shaped lawyer philosophy and my framework, I have come up with this thing called the business person mindset, which is, those of you who are familiar with the growth mindset, Carol Dweck's growth mindset, it's a similar kind of idea in the sense that it's contrasted with another mindset. So the growth mindset is contrasted with a fixed mindset. The business person mindset, my business person mindset, is contrasted with just a lawyer mindset. So you can literally, take an assessment. I've got, assessments you can do, and you can assess to what extent do you have that mindset. And it's foundational. Just like Carol Dweck says, mindsets are the psychological foundation for reskilling. In other words, there's not much point spending a lot of time learning these new skills, business skills, if you don't have the right mindset. And that's true. If you have the business person mindset as a lawyer, a lot of this stuff I'm talking about will come naturally. If you don't have it, it's almost impossible to do it. So it's really very, very important to have that mindset. But the good news is that with mindsets, you can change them. So if you happen to have just a lawyer mindset, or you're sort of somewhere in the middle, you can there's certain things you can do to, enhance that mindset, and that will be game changing for you.
Yeah. And there's so much value in that. I mean, I can't tell you, like, I think I basically try and say that thing, but not as eloquently as you just did in that, if you don't understand the purpose of what you're doing, whether it's functionally or personally, then it's super hard to get anybody on board with everything that drives that, right? And whether it's just operational stuff, management stuff, people stuff, technology stuff. Like, if it's all just to reduce costs and do contracts faster, then it's kind of like, how long is that energy going to last, right? Like, there's no reason to do it. I think that's kind of the same as saying, if you think you're doing a legal job, like a law firm kind of job in a company, you're going to have a really tough time. It's just going to be friction the whole way, right? Like, headwinds, whatever you want to call it, the whole way. So I really like how you put that, Peter. And also I've been seeing recently a number of, I like to think that, I have enough perspective now, not as much as you, but enough perspective now to see the evolution of the profession from back in the day. For me, it's the early 2000s to today. And I really am, I don't know what the right word is. I'm pleased and sort of glad, I guess, that now I'm seeing CLO jobs where purpose and inspirational leadership and modernizing and change management and operational mindset, evolution in terms of operational effectiveness, people, processes, technology, setting up those kind of teams are the top two requirements for big CLO roles, even in Europe.
Yep.
Right. To me, that's a huge change.
It is. It is. And I think you make a good point that, so obviously it's a lot easier to be a T-shaped lawyer. Let's use that expression. If the leadership team, starting with the CLO at GC, is of this mind, but basically buys into the philosophy, the T-shaped lawyer philosophy. And I call it a philosophy because, really you either subscribe to it or you don't. You think you should be just a lawyer, like you were saying, or not, or you should be a business person who happens to be a lawyer and who provides business input and advice, not just legal advice, and does business work, not just legal work. And I actually refer to it as a philosophy now, because you either believe in it or you don't.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people that don't, particularly in the UK, by the way. There's a lot of debate going on. You may have seen my exchange with folks over that's another conversation. We could go down that rabbit hole, but cut a long story short, there's a group of people there who believe that lawyers should be just lawyers, and that it's dangerous to go beyond that. And that's why, all these problems at the UK Post Office and elsewhere happens. Well, no, it's not. That's not why that happened. And by the way, how can you possibly just be a lawyer and just do legal work? That's almost impossible. Because, for example, when I work with legal teams, as I do, one of the things I do is we dig deep into the type of work that the team's doing. And I have a way of assessing how much legal work and legal advice, in the strict sense of, legal advice, are you doing? And you know what the typical percentage is? Try and guess.
20, 15?
Yeah, 20. Yeah, exactly. Work good, spot on. 20.
That's my experience. Yeah. Absolutely.
5% of work is legal work and legal advice, like real legal work, i.e., my definition of that is work that only a qualified lawyer can do, as opposed to work that you've always been doing. That's not legal work. Now, if you think about that, that means that 75% of the work you do is not legal work. So you're already doing other work. And I say that work is, obviously, if you exclude personal stuff, it's if you work in-house in a business, it's business work. It's one form or another of business work. And as you know, I categorize those into two big buckets: internal business work, which largely is what we call legal ops today. Plus it's, admin, reporting, and obviously management of people, people management, if you're a manager. So that's internal business work, because the primary beneficiary of that work is the legal department, not necessarily the business. The business may benefit to some extent, but not really most of the time. So it's important work, and it's obviously stuff that's very relevant to law boo, and that's the space you guys play in. And that's great. That's a very important thing. But the major limitation of that is the primary beneficiary is the legal department, not the business. So it's the other category of work I call business work, client business work, internal business work, client business work. And I break client business work down into two buckets: business partnering and business leadership. Business partnering is basically input and advice, just in the course of whatever you're doing. And that anyone can do that. Junior people, senior people, it doesn't take extra time, blah, blah, blah. And business leadership is where you're literally taking a fair bit of time to work together with typically cross-functional members on projects, business projects, ones that you might just join, someone else might have initiated, or something that you initiate. Wow. Now that's powerful. When you're identifying a business opportunity or a problem, and you're putting a team together. And as you know, I mentioned that in the book, examples of that. I won the Business Leadership CEO Business Leadership Award at Sun. So I give examples of why I won that award. And basically this is the space, this client business work, where you can really add value. So I say it's all about doing more with less, which is the typical framing. I say it's do less to do more. That's my framing of how in-house lawyers should be thinking about things. Do less of the stuff that doesn't really add much value, that you don't need to be doing, so that you can do more of, helping internal business work. You may not, if you've got a legal ops person, then you may not be the one doing it, but you can help do that. You can be a leader in the legal department, even if you're not. And then secondly, and primarily, doing more client business work. And that happens to be, in my view, the future of work. If you think about what's happening, and we can touch on this later perhaps, but why don't I save that thought till later on, thinking about the future and where things are going. But anyway, that's sort of way I frame things, and I give you I sort of, in the book and also in my new online program, I go into detail into all of these things and how people can understand these things and get better at doing them.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm so glad that you are doing that work, because it feels to me like the profession desperately needs more of this kind of thing. As an example, I don't think there's a great name for what you do, right? Like I've seen you call yourself a coach,
Legal coach. Yep.
legal team coach. I would call you a legal management consultant, somebody who, can tell me how to manage my legal function better, right? And I don't know why we don't all have, so I went to this conference, a big ACC conference. I don't remember if I've told you about this, Peter, but I went to this big ACC conference. I was in this enormous room, mostly empty, right? There were only like 200 people there in this room that probably could have sat 10,000 people in Nashville. And they were doing a panel, and that was interesting to me about legal leadership. And they asked this question: how many of you have used consultants in your legal function? And they're like, not external counsel, consultants. 2%.
Wow.
2%. And this is, of course, in the United States, right? I think Australia is a bit further ahead than the US in this regard. But I was really thinking in that moment, what if I went into my business people and said, we've only used consultants, 2% of our profession have used consult, and they'd be like, so do you mean 102%? Do you mean 122%? Because 2% doesn't make any sense, right? Like, of course you've used, how do you get better at stuff if you don't have external experts to at least give you some, like, where's the book, right? But for in-house, there just hasn't been that. And there haven't been enough people who've said, like, there is a way to do this role better, to run this function better. And I think you're one of the top people in the field who can actually provide that guidance, right, in a really credible way. So yeah, it still shocks me every time I think about that. I'm just like, this is insane.
It's
Like,
funny.
and
You go.
even in the States, like, I would struggle to find someone who I could say, here's a credible legal management consultant, right? And I'm not talking about someone who comes in from one of the big consultancies and tells you how to reduce your external counsel spend, right? Like, that is not legal management consultancy. That is billing operations consultancy, in my humble opinion, right? Like, legal management consultancy, I need somebody who can sit down with me as a general counsel and be literally like, okay, let's talk about the structure of your function. Why are you doing it that way?
Exactly.
Why do you even exist, right? How do you motivate your team? Like, what's the purpose here? And I think that's what you can bring to the table. And I think there's going to be a much bigger demand for that going forward.
I think so too. And you mentioned the big accounting firms and things, the KPMGs and Deloittes and et cetera. And as you know, I spent some time, I had the experience working with them. I actually helped set up KPMG's, they called it LOTS, Legal Operations and Transformation Services. So together with one of the partners there, we set that business up. It's now a global business. Unfortunately, it folded in Australia for reasons that I won't go into. But so I set that up, and so I got to see how those kind of organizations work. And you're right; they're very kind of structured. They've got some good people, and some of the law firms have these sorts of practices as well. And look, they can help with, as you say, especially legal operations stuff. But beyond that, I'm talking beyond that. I mean, I suppose the way I look at it is, as you know, and as most people who are into change and innovation know, the classic model is PPT, people, process, and technology, right? You want to be working on those three things. And I would say that, there's plenty of people who can help you with technology, you being one of them, the whole law firm team, you and others, some of these other organizations, the KPMGs of the world can help you with process. But very few people can help you with people. And and there isn't, if I step back and have a look at, over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of change. I mean, when I first started doing this 10 years ago, I was going to GCs talking about innovation, and they were giving me that sort of blank look as if, really? I mean, we need to innovate, do we? So I
Yeah.
was a bit ahead of
Why would we change anything?
exactly.
Everything's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A little bit ahead of my time back then. Now, of course, everyone gets it. And, especially with AI now, but virtually no one has a good story to tell about people, what I call human transformation. It's great to have digital transformation and process transformation, and most people can figure that out themselves or with a bit of help. But what I find is I'm pretty much the only one who's got a compelling story on human transformation. And human transformation is not, how to get people to adopt tech, which is how most people think of people.
Change management.
Yeah. There is that element to it, of course, but no. Human transformation is much bigger than that. It's like digital transformation. It's like, how can you, the word transformation means to change from one thing to another. It doesn't mean improve it a little bit. It means transformation. So a transformation from an I-shaped lawyer to a T-shaped lawyer is a transformation. That's what I'm talking about. And that is, actually the thing. You don't need a big budget. It's actually easier than doing, in a way, when you understand how, than digital transformation. Don't need a big budget for it. There's no worries about, whether the vendors are going to be around in the future or not, or, support or adoption or integration or all those issues you got to deal with tech. You can just do it. And once you understand how, you can get out there and kind of go for it. Anyway.
Yes. Oh, and it's highly impactful as well, right? Like the people are exponentially more impactful than lots of other things, the processes or the technology in the end. And what we find at LawView is it's far more difficult to have a successful transformation in terms of operations and technology if you don't have that mindset of we're business people with legal skills here. We're a competitive advantage to this business, and we want to, drive strategic objectives. I talk to people about that kind of stuff a lot, right? Because I really want to start the process there, as opposed to let's roll out some technology and then sort of backfill the really more challenging stuff, I guess you'd say, right? The stuff where it's like we've been doing things in a way that we think we're doing them right, but we keep getting this sort of, implied feedback from the business that we're not, right? They're not inviting us to the offsites. They're not inviting us to the strategy meetings. We're not on the leadership team, et cetera.
That's right, David. I mean, as you may remember, I was in the UK recently, a couple of months ago, doing a bit of work, and I met up with Richard Susskind, who I've known for quite a while. And he and I, we were chatting about this whole AI thing, and kind of the mistake that I think most legal departments are making is they're thinking, and lawyers are thinking of AI as a productivity tool. And it is, but there's a lot more to it than that. And the real game-changing opportunity is really to, basically use AI to reimagine, to transform, dare I use that word again, kind of the whole way that a legal department works, what it does and what it doesn't do, and how you can empower the business to actually, in a way beyond old-fashioned chatbots and stuff, and really free up time. But it really begs the question of it. It basically says you've got to figure out, okay, if lawyers are not going to do a lot of that work anymore, and they won't once agentic AI really kicks in and people adopt it and use it, then what are lawyers going to do? What's the team going to do? So you need what I call a future of work strategy, and that's where the T-shaped lawyer thing can come in and be so compelling.
Yes.
But you need to start doing that now, because you can't just click a finger and say, okay, we want people to be business people all of a sudden and expect them to be able to do that. It's going to take time. They need to develop this range of, and by the way, it's not just skills. Everyone says, oh, what non-legal skills should we learn? It's like, no. First of all, you've got to decide what work you're going to do. If you're going to be just an I-shaped lawyer, well, frankly, you don't have to worry about a lot of these non-legal skills. If you are going to lean into the T-shaped philosophy and be a business person, then you need not just skills, you need skills, competencies, qualities, mindsets, and knowledge. You need all of those things. And that's where my T-shaped lawyer framework, that's the second book, comes into play and gives you some structure around that. And you read an advanced copy of that, so you got a little insight into that. So that's crucial. And it's all part of this, kind of whole new vision. So you need the leaders of legal departments to be kind of, having a new vision for what the legal department can look like, and then having strategies that sort of implement not just process and technology, but people change.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So why don't you tell us about how you engage with do you call them clients, customers,
Yeah,
to,
to
bring about that kind of transformative change?
Yeah, thanks, David. So historically, as I mentioned earlier, my sort of work was primarily, flying all over the world and, sitting with a legal team for a 1 or a 2 day session, going through my program so I have two dimensions to the program. One is an individual program and the other is a team program. So if you're going to really implement serious change, particularly with people, you need to work it at both levels, individual and team. Most GCs make the mistake of just thinking about it at the team level, not at the individual level. So it has to be, have to be aligned and work together. So typically I do the in-person thing, but obviously I'm getting older and I don't want to be traveling around the world not as much as you do, for example. I don't know how you do it. It's amazing. Crazy.
I have clones.
Yeah.
Clones on each continent.
Must have. So what I've done recently, as I think I've turned the individual in-person program into an online program. So it's a video, it's about 7 hours of little 5-minute micro videos, which I make available on a platform called Kajabi. So now you can be an individual in Bolivia and you can do the program yourself, or you can be a team in Netherlands. So I have clients now or customers legal teams who will go, the best way to do it is to go through it as a team online. I may or may not be involved at various, stages of that program. And then maybe at the end of that, maybe we'll do an in-person thing. But by then they have all the information and are much more receptive to kind of the guidance, and we can get into the more pragmatics of what works and what doesn't work. Whereas typically in the past with an in-person thing, it's a bit overwhelming. As you read, there's 2 books there, and the program covers much more than the book. So there's a lot of information there and a lot of new stuff, new concepts, new ideas. So yeah, now it's more a case of what I'm encouraging people to do is to take the online program, and then, perhaps I'll get involved to help with questions at various stages of the program. And that's sort of what I'm doing, the way I'm engaging with clients now, which is fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you're taking your message and communicating at scale, which is, of course, what somebody who worked for 15 years at Sun Microsystems would do. So yeah, congratulations on getting that out. I think that's the future, certainly, of transforming the profession. It's, I don't remember if you've done much teaching in, institutions, but I can tell you it is so arcane and slow to try and make change in these big universities. There's some institutions that are a bit quicker to adapt, but the ones that I've encountered, there's just a lot of institutional inertia. There are, professors who are teaching a case book from whenever they're not particularly interested in, and they're doing their research, and that's what matters. And they're not teaching people they're certainly not teaching people to be in-house lawyers.
Yep.
So it's people like you who are going to need to put the content out there and really drive the evolution forward of the profession. So where can people find that course, Peter?
So best way is probably, I've got a website, T-Shape Legal, tshapelawyer.com, which you can, there's a reference there. You can find me there, or on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. And I've got but I'll send you a little QR code, which you can post with the podcast if you like. And
Absolutely.
people can go
Yeah.
to the, so basically, if you're doing it as an individual, it's a little more expensive, but if you get a group together, either a group of individuals or a team, a legal team, then there's, I'll obviously offer significant discounts for people
Gotcha.
in that way.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, very, very happy to have gotten the chance to speak to you in this format, Peter. We didn't tell anyone, but you were actually in Los Gatos, California, not that long ago. We met up for a coffee. It feels like yesterday, but of course it wasn't. The summer has come and gone, et cetera. But it was great to see you in person when you were here. And now you are somewhere in Australia, right?
I'm actually in a place called Kangaroo Valley, which is, and that's
Highly appropriate.
A little villa. This is a rural property we have. It's about 2 hours south of Sydney, and there are lots of kangaroos.
Wow.
A very beautiful part of Australia.
Awesome. Awesome. So thank you for joining us from Kangaroo Valley. As we said, reach out to Peter on LinkedIn or via his T-Shaped Lawyer webpage. I guarantee you'll get value out of that. And I'll see you soon, Peter. Thanks so much for joining us.
Been a pleasure.
And thanks everybody for listening or watching the Legal Leaders podcast. We'll see you again on the next episode. Cheers.
If you enjoyed listening, please hit follow and leave us a review on your listening platform of choice. We love engaging with our community and hearing from you, so please head to inview.lawview.com. Thank you so much for tuning in.